I press the mic. Yeah.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the first planning committee after the last election. Very pleased to be back as the chairman and welcome those members of the council I've never sat on a committee with. So Jill, Karen, I don't think I've ever sat on committees with you, but well, I know you've been on planning for a year anyway, I think. Welcome aboard. Marjorie's an old hat now. Oh, and Shafaz, of course, yeah. Welcome on board, buddy. I have to read out this announcement first, and then we'll go into the agenda proper. So, welcome to today's meeting. This is a public meeting, and members of the public and press are permitted to report on the proceedings. Reporting includes filming, photographing, making an audio recording, and providing commentary on proceedings. Please note that this meeting is recorded and streamed live. These recordings are published on the relevant meeting page of the council's website. By choosing to attend this public meeting, you have deemed to have given your consent to being filmed or recorded, and for any footage to be broadcast or published. If the alarm sounds and the premises must be evacuated immediately, do not spend time collecting personal belongings. All emergency escape routes are clearly signed. Once you've left the building, the assembly point is in the High Street opposite the Guildhall. Members and other speakers are reminded to use the microphone when speaking. So thank you. So we go to the first agenda item, which is appointment of substitutes. Margaret.
Yes, Chair, we have Councillor Lawrence for Councillor Orcott, and we have apologies from Councillors Amos and Cleary. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any declarations of interest? No. Go to the minutes of the previous meeting. Obviously, I wasn't at the last meeting, so I've asked Pat if she will sign them, because obviously she'll be able to confirm whether they are a true record or not. If we go through them by page numbers, page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, and I think we're on the final page then, page 6, so that's great. Pat, if you'd be so kind to sign those as a true record, thank you. We then move on to, there are no site visits today. Public participation, I'm assuming not, because there's no one sat at the back of the room. Or public representation. I'm tempted to say we could be on for a record here time. We'll go to agenda item 7, which is the application for the university development on Bromyard Road. Andrew.
Thank you, councillors, and hello again. Right, so this is an application relating to the University Park Road development. I've got my little Twizzler, hopefully this, yep. So the application is, or the application site, I should say, is outlined in red for the benefit of you who know the site. Blaw's homes are pretty much all the way around the site in terms of existing development. And I'll show you some photos in a bit. So this is a reserved matters application, and what I've done is prepare, because many of you are new members and some of you will have not dealt with outline and reserved matters and all the technical jargons that come with that, I have done you a FAQ, kind of simplified version of what it means and, when we talk technical jargon. But if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. So this is a reserved matters application to consider all the matters other than access, and the principal access points were agreed as part of the outline application. So in respect of this, the outline master plan, when that was approved for up to 120 houses, showed this, and this was the illustrative master plan on which the outline planning permission is based. And you can see the two access points, or two principal access points, and obviously the main road, which is used to be called, I think it's University Park Way, used to be called. It's now Oak View Way, as I understand it. And so the master plan actually broadly follows that. All houses, good parking areas, good. We actually get a little bit more green space, as you can see, in terms of bits and pieces. And the layout follows the principles established at outline stage. In terms of the landscaping, a bit more detail. So these are the soft landscaping proposals. You can see a orchard. I know my pointer won't work, but it is the bottom right of the and linear rows of trees. You can see obviously gardens and those aspects. And again, the southern half of the development, you can see again the landscaping proposals and how they all kind of fit in. There's street trees, there's all, and there's good routes, and there's importantly a link between the north and the south parcels. Some of the street elevations, these are the street scenes. So again, pretty typical for a modern housing development. Again, you can see that the properties turn the corners. There's no blank elevations there. And those kind of aspects. Again, a bit of a closer look at one of the house types. And you can see this is a 2-bed property. And you can see again, lounge, kitchen, all the things you expect in a modern house. And this is a slightly larger 3-bedroom house. And again, you can see windows and how it relates, how that relates to a number of key aspects. And the house type, why not? Let's have a. So this is another one of the 4 house types that's on the site. Again, a good example of 3 beds. The 4 bed, sorry, this is one of the 4-bed properties. And again, lounge, kitchen. So this is some photos from the site last week when I went out just to have a quick look. You can see a number of the street trees have already been implemented. The public footpath is still obviously there, runs through the site, and you see some of the that the green space or the greenery has been retained in and around the public footpath. So whilst there has been an element of site clearance on the site, which did cause some consternation, those were principally in the development, the areas planned for development. So there we go. So and again, you can see the trees have been cordoned off, and the development sites, that's for their own safety and making sure that JCB doesn't suddenly run into them when they're reversing. And again, what you can see there is the beginnings of the entrance, and that will obviously be where the site entrance is as well, so where the compound will be. And you can see in the background, although the white, little white buildings, that's the site compound for Blaw's. That's it, councillors. The recommendation, we've had to, there's a late paper. So following discussions on the Section 106 aspects, there's no changes principally to the Section 106, but one of the clauses, as set out in paragraph 3 of your late paper, includes a formula contribution towards education. And what we're doing in terms of this is just clarifying what the developer has done is clarify what the amounts would be for the qualifying for the development, and that is set out at paragraph 4. So what we need to do in order to give the development certainty is just provide a simple deed of variation to substitute the formula for the precise figures. For those, I know we had one question. SEND is special educational needs and disability. That's what that means. As I say, that has been done, and as I say, that is the educational department's figures for what would be qualifying. I should say as well that the scheme is now for 100% affordable housing, but the outline planning permission only secured 30%. The remaining 70% would be outside the terms of the Section 106 because we wouldn't alter the terms of the Section 106 as part of reserved matters. But it is nonetheless a commitment by the developer, and they have as part of their development proposals. So it sits outside the Section 106, but just means we get more affordable housing potentially on the site. And as I say, those have all been agreed. So the revised recommendation is at paragraph 7 of your late papers. It's twofold. One continues to approve the reserved matters, which, as you've seen, is we consider to be acceptable, subject to the conditions on section 9, and also delegates authority to the corporate director and my colleagues in legal to just work through a simple deed of variation to bring forward the educational figures. That's it. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Andrew. So I open questions to the floor. Do any members have any questions? I've got Councillor Andy Roberts.
I think this is probably more of a generic question, to be honest. We know that measures are going through to ensure that when these sort of developments are done, there's biodiversity net gain. Now, this looks very impressive to me. I mean, it talks about the 28 bird species and slowworms, so it looks very impressive. Now, under the new arrangement, that whatever is agreed will have to be in place, I think, for 30 years. I'm looking, this is what, now, when we are dealing with something like this, have we got any protection for this? I mean, in 2 years' time, can what we've agreed be dug up and we lose our biodiversity, or can we condition it to something similar to the what's going to be enforced shortly?
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, so all the planting schemes and those kind of things that are there, we insist on the standard wording for planning conditions, and these were on the outline planning permission, is that if the tree dies or a species dies, those are replaced, and that maintenance schedule is for 5 years along those kind of lines. To go further than that would be, as I say, unreasonable. But as I say, with regard to biodiversity net gain, the procedures are coming into place. At the moment, all you have to do is demonstrate a gain. We know that coming along at a rate of knots is 10% net gain. Again, that's coming along in legislation, so we don't have that legislation as yet. So the short answer is yes, there is safeguards there, and we will continue to manage the communal spaces and work with them. They will need to produce a management plan for the communal spaces to ensure their long-term provision.
That rather that doesn't allay my fears, to be frank. But thanks very much. But what we're saying is we know that coming down the track is something that's going to give a 30-year assurance, but we are stuck with 5 years because that hasn't been enacted yet. I just wonder whether a bit like a development plan might reach a stage of maturity, whether we can say, well, we know this is going to happen, we can go beyond our 5 years. Because 5 years doesn't sound like a sustainable thing to me. It sounds as though it's almost transient.
I think we have a little bit more confidence or some more powers in the fact that any change to the biodiversity area, removal of green space or whatever, would have to come through a planning application, and therefore the planning committee would be in a position to object or approve, depending on what the application was, on its own merits, obviously. So we do have some powers, but I do see where your concerns come from.
Not least all because we've signed up to biodiversity as a council, and I'm not only thinking about threats of development. I don't think that would be the case here because of the way the ribbon's been done, but of neglect in a way.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Roberts, we understand your concerns, and we are in a sort of interim stage at the moment where we know that new requirements are on their way, but for the purposes of dealing with applications at the moment, we're working with our existing adopted development plan policies. But I think the reassurance should come from the conditions that are on the outline, as Andrew has explained. Give us protection of that space, that green infrastructure, and that's where the biodiversity benefits or enhancements arise from. It's that management plan which will be submitted at a future date where we'll look for the detail as to how those spaces will be managed, irrespective of who will be managing them. And not in respect of everything, so not necessarily every aspect of the soft planting. But in the case of trees, you would expect that after 5 years, some may have died and needed to be replaced, but after 5 years, they would have reached a level of maturity and size that if we wanted to and we thought it was justified, we may be able to protect new tree planting with new tree preservation orders. But again, that would be for a decision for a future date. Thank you, Chair.
Apologies. I've got Karen, Marjorie, Karen and Jill and Pat to speak. And because I'm a simple man, I'm going to go around in clockwise order because that means I won't miss anyone out. So please, Karen, your question.
Thank you, Chair. In the application, I can see that highways have got some concerns in the details of some of the aspects. So one of them was to do with the positions of drop curbs not following desire lines. I wonder whether it's such a detail, whether that could actually be reviewed, and the applicant could work with highways to see whether they could come to an agreement of where those drop curbs should be.
We have highways here.
Yeah, I mean, the whole site will be subject to section 38, let all know. 38. We can't adopt this site until the actual Oakview Way, I think, is adopted. So normally we would deal with that under the detail of the section 38. But this is something I don't think it's a reason, I say, it's not a reason for refusal, but we can work with the applicant to ensure that they are on the appropriate desire lines. I don't think that's an issue at all.
So the thing is that if you don't put in footway, paths now, they'll never be put in. So it seems quite short-sighted of the applicant not to put in that very small section where they're doing so much. It seems a bit of a shame. And then from an ecology point of view, I was thinking that because there are such a range of bird species on the site, is the applicant going to take down trees in stages, or are they taking them all out? And then what will the birds do in the meantime when they come and there's nothing there? Could we put up some boxes? Could we do something that looks after the birds whilst the houses are being built? Is there some way that that could be managed? And then I know that this is reserve matters, and they mention air source heat pumps, but there's no mention of solar panels. And obviously solar panels would be on the roofs, so you'd see them from an appearance point of view. So I take it that there aren't any in the application, it's not mentioned. And then I suppose my other concern is just that if we don't have highways adopting these roads, then if this is 100% low-income housing, I don't really think it's appropriate for families to be burdened with the cost, an ongoing annual cost additional to their rent and their costs. And it'd be really great if it could be adopted.
I'll let the experts pick those up. I don't think there's any intent for county not to adopt the road, but Karen.
Unfortunately, we can't adopt the road because it wouldn't link to an adoptable highway, because at the moment Oakview Way is not adopted, and we can't, and it must link to a current adopted highway. So that is the issue here. If Oakview Way was adopted, then we would happily consider this for adoption.
What is the barrier to Oakview Way not being adopted?
My understanding, it was never offered for adoption by the developer. The developer has to offer it. We cannot insist that it is offered for adoption. If they don't offer it for adoption.
Is there an ongoing discussion then between highways and the developer, or is there likely to be, to say we want to adopt the roads on the main site? To do that, we've got to adopt. Are you going to offer us Oakview? My question is, can you be proactive?
We can certainly be proactive, and we can enter into discussions with them, but I cannot promise you anything, but except that we will be proactive. That's all I can promise.
Thank you. There were a couple of other questions in there, reference solar panels and the section of the footway. Have we got answers for those?
Without going, and with regard to I understand discussions I have commenced with the right-of-way officer as to what status or what they want to do, how they want to surface that footpath. So that is in those discussions already in hand. And again, there are conditions proposed as part of the outline planning permission to bring forward that, and just checking whether or not Yes, so condition 3, we've said prior to the first occupation, details of the enhancement to the right-of-way shown on the soft landscaping plans shall be submitted to us. So and any approved details shall be implemented prior to the 50% occupation. So that is as I say, just making sure that we get to see the details, which should be obviously agreed with county council rights of way, but that we know what's going forward. At the moment, as I say, whether or not that's a track or just a natural path, as it is at the moment, or whether or not that becomes more surfaced because you've got development around it. That's a matter between the public rights of way officer and the developer. But and again, we will continue to look at that and keep that under review. Solar panels, there are a number of solar panels on the site as part of the proposals. It's not shown on the elevation, those floor plans and elevations, they don't typically show that, but again, they are part of the outline planning permission again that we established was to include those provisions within the actual proposals. In terms of implementing biodiversity net gain, again, there's a requirement, again, under the outline planning permission, we put in all sorts of that provisions will come forward. The photos you showed is as clear as it's going to get, so to speak, in terms of the existing trees which I showed had hedge fencing on either side. That is the tree protection measures. So all trees that are to be felled have been felled.
Sorry, I wasn't talking about the public right of way. I was talking about a section of paving that's missing from the new development. There's one side on an access that is missing. The south access, yeah. For some reason it's not on both sides. Then Highways have pointed out that for that would be an inconvenience for shame just
Is it a condition that they have pavements on both sides? I know we don't normally like to have unpaved highways, do we?
No, we don't always have footways on both sides. And right, it is the south access where they are not providing one. They are providing a service strip, I believe, which isn't going to have services underneath it, but they are not providing an actual footway. Sufficient for us to say without that, the whole development.
Because there is one on the other side of the pavement, yeah.
Again, it can form for further discussions along with the
Thank you, Karen.
Yeah, just going back to the solar panels, I didn't see the solar panels referenced in your report. That's all. So that's why I asked the question. Thank you.
Thank you. Marjorie.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions. One is about whereabouts the play area is and is access easy to the play area. I'd also like to raise the question of the money for education. I'm just wondering why there's no money for secondary SEND. I'm sure the need is just as great at secondary level as at primary level. Thank you.
I'll deal with the second one first. That's County Council Education saying these are where we need the money. So that's their calculations and their assessment of need. So in effect, that's what's required by County Education. Those figures don't come from the developer; they come from County Education. I'm just looking for the play area on the landscape proposals.
I must admit, I don't think I've seen a play area on here. I don't think there is one.
The report says there is one.
Top end, go to the next slide, sorry. No, up one side, that's right. Right, you can, on the middle of the screen on the left-hand side. It's there, that's it. To other side, sorry, just move it left, there you go, that's it, that's the play area there.
Okay, as long as, I mean, it would be better if it was in the middle so that everybody could get to it, you know, it was easily accessible from the north part, but at least it's there, so I'm content.
Unfortunately, I think the topography of the site is you've got the pathway and the hedgerow right in the middle, and we don't want to cut those down.
Can I just say, I do absolutely back what Karen's just said about the importance of those two roads being adopted. And I would also much prefer to see that footpath, but I accept that we're not going to get it.
Yeah, I mean, I think on the adoption, I'm going to step outside of my swim lane now, but I'm assuming that you can't adopt a road unless you haven't adopted. The reason you can't adopt it until you've got Oak View is because the county couldn't get access to it otherwise because it's over private land. Is that right? So, but it would appear that county are on the case. Highways are on the case. So, and of course you have to come every week, and if it doesn't get adopted, you're just going to get a hard time. Thank you, Marjorie. Karen. Guys, I thought I saw your hand raised. So, in which case, Jill, please.
Age is this park for? Is it all ages? Play park?
That will be, typically they are designed for ages, it's 0 to 8,
So
it's
young
kind
one.
of that age group. And then obviously older, it's the older children that often get left out because they need youth shelters
Yes.
and all the other kind of things, but those are specific. They're typically provided in what are called NEEPs, which is neighbourhood equipped areas of play. So local equipped areas of play are generally for toddlers and small children.
Right. Could I just ask, I want to ask like community type questions. So parking is included in the design. Is it sufficient? And are there charging points for electric vehicles part of that?
Parking is being provided, full parking in accordance with the adoptable standards is being provided, as well as some visitor parking. And as part of the outline condition, I think we've referenced in our comments, is that all of the dwellings need to be need to have electrical vehicle charging points.
Right.
So that is covered as part of the outline.
Street lighting. Is there a plan for how much street lighting is going to be built in? Is it, sorry, am I outside of, I apologise.
Valid question.
No street lighting plan has been agreed.
It has or it hasn't?
It hasn't.
Will
No
it
street
be agreed? Is that part of what gets agreed or?
Well, we're not going to adopt, at the moment, we're not going to adopt the site, so we cannot say that it's necessarily going to.
So in terms of planning permission, we could grant permission with no lighting at all, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, sounds suboptimal, but anyway. Public seating, is there any public seating to be provided as part of this development? Benches?
There's a couple around the LEAP or the play area, sorry, the local area play. So that, again, there's a couple in there, but there's no others proposed as part of the other communal areas that I can see on part of the landscape proposals.
Can that be increased at all? So few.
I think the
Yeah,
question is
exactly.
where would you logistically put them without, say, one of the difficulties of putting seats in is they need to be on a route, need to be on a good public footpath route. Again, we could add that as a condition if that's what.
Well, there's the trees. Yeah, I don't know, but I don't know exactly where they would go, but I think some benches, bench revision would be nice if it could be done.
I'm happy if you, then I'm happy for that to come forward.
And I was just going to ask, is there a community centre nearby, and not on the site, but when any community type function space available?
I'm going to defer to councillor Shafaz because it's his ward, but
Okay. Thank you. That's the end of my questions.
thank you. I've got Pat and then Karen, I'll come back to you. Great. Okay, Karen, please.
I'm a bit concerned. We're building affordable housing, which is fantastic, as those of us who were on that meeting last night will testify, we need it. But I am very concerned that we seem to be burdening these householders. Will they have to pay for their own streetlight provision and maintenance and all that? And if so, because we can't adopt the roads, is there any mechanism to reduce their council tax burden because of that? Will they be perhaps getting a lower bill, and that portion of that money can then be captured to do the maintenance for them? Because I have a feeling individually these households will struggle to meet these bills, and that needs to be backed up by a local authority sort of figure.
I take your comments. I think we're sort of straying out of planning conditions where we have pan. It's a genuine concern, but we try and plan for the best, not for the worst. So I don't think there's any intent not to adopt. However, I accept that were they not to be adopted, then there would be additional costs. But of course, then that would have to be considered by our housing team when you're putting people in those houses and how we would deal with that. I think because it's 100% social housing, which is fantastic, and as I say, I was on the meeting last night as well, that's great, but I think we probably need to be cognizant going forward that we don't forget that point, and, you know, last minute we move 120 families on there who all go, great, we've got a house, which we've needed, and then we find that they've got an extra £50 a month bill because they've got to pay for upkeep of the road and whatever. But I don't think there is any intent from a housing provider, whichever the housing authority is, to do that. But yeah, I think they're all valid points, and I'm sure Ms Hanchett has been scribbling away furiously, has taken them down.
Yes.
I'm going to get some sensible advice now as well from George. So.
Well, the other thing was the park. Are we responsible for the park, or will that be the developer? Maintenance of the park. Will that be our green spaces people?
So George asked first. We've got George who's going to answer one question, then we've got Duncan who's going to come in.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say that because the developer is a registered provider, although our Section 106 agreement is only requesting we can only govern 30%, of that, 80% of those houses are social rent, and affordable housing is capped at a rent level, and it's this rent level set by Homes England. So they wouldn't be able to increase the rent to include things, to put the rent above a level that was capped. So I think that should give you some reassurance regarding the social rented properties. There's also a cap for affordable rented, which are outside of the Section 106 agreement. It's slightly higher cap. And there are the shared ownership properties. I don't know, because they might be buying a portion, it could be that as part of the lease, they may have to contribute. But again, the rent they would pay on that, the portion they don't buy, that also is capped at level set by Homes England. Give you a bit of a reassurance in that respect.
Yeah, and sorry, I'm going to just add to that. Sorry, George. And I think, with my businessman's head on, if I'm the housing provider and I know that only 20% of the people potentially can contribute to, I'm not going to sell it. So therefore, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure highways adopt the road. So, but yeah, I'll take your point in, Duncan. Jenny.
Thank you, Chair. I think a lot of the questions have been answered. I'm delighted about the 100% affordable. I am concerned about the unadopted roads, because in Diglas we had a major problem for a very long time where lights and bins weren't emptied either. And we haven't talked about litter bins on the footpath, but maybe some provision should be made for that. And also, there's a bit about slow worms. I'm also thinking about creatures like hedgehogs, making sure that the fences are porous to allow wildlife to go through? And what provision, is there anything written in about that? I couldn't see it.
It's not part of the presentation, councillor, but there is a fences plan, and as I say, that does include a number of hedgehog highways, as they're called. So yeah, there is. So there are some gaps. Obviously, what we've got to do is make sure that those gaps remain, so to speak, because very often, if you see a hole in the fence, you replace it straight away with the new fence panel. But there you go. So yeah, as I say, it is shown on the fences plan that forms part of the application.
And again, going back to a previous question about the management of the green spaces, we know in other parts of the city where residents are having to pay for that management rather than it being provided. What assurance do we get that that won't be another burden?
Again, we can't influence the payment, so to speak. In effect, that would be a matter for the whole site developer as to how they manage that future development. As it's a registered provider, I would expect them obviously to have principles and agreed with the affordable housing and housing colleagues to make sure that those aren't burdened. But as I say, that's outside the terms of planning.
Thanks so much. I think what Andrew's just said is that this isn't Chris Mitchell's Enterprises building this site. It is a registered provider. So they have a slightly different outlook, I would suggest, and experience on dealing with large social housing developments. So I guess that gives us some confidence, but I think officers have done most they can to condition. But Pat, you have a question.
On the whole, I think this is an extremely good application, and the amount of social and affordable housing is very welcome. I think we're all aware of the 4,000 people on our waiting list, so something like this is most welcome. With regard to the green space, I think the only thing I can't quite recall is what percentage of the site is green space. Do we know that?
Again, I can't recall that off the top of my head, councillor. I'm not sure it's in the report either. So
yeah,
but it is a sizable sum, and that, as I say, it does accord with the principles of the master plan. So, as I say, it will be around about 20%, 30%, or something like that. As I say.
Yeah.
28% or something came to mind, and it's gone up. Or it went up from the original plan.
Yeah, it is larger than on the original plan, but as I say, it's...
Yeah, right, thank you. The reason I wanted to clarify that for the benefit of the public and the committee was because we have had an objector who wanted it to be 40%, and we have actually asked for 40% of other developers in the past, so it wasn't an unusual sort of thing to object to. It seems a little slight, but it's not too bad. Within the biodiversity that we're expecting, I presume we're going to translocate the slow worms when we come to the detail, because they are on site by the look of it.
They're a protected species, councillor, so they would need licences to do any work
That's what I'm
that
thinking.
would affect those.
Thank you, yeah. Other than that, I can't see what objections one might raise that haven't already been dealt with, so I shall certainly be voting for this.
Thank you, Pat. Shafaz. Oh, apologies. Shafaz, then Karen. Karen, okay. Yeah, go on. Let's not die over gallantry. Shafaz first, then.
My main concern really would be the GP surgery, because when I was canvassing in Meadowbank Drive, most of the residents have been waiting there 6 months, 8 months to be seen. Would it be too much stress for the surgery? That's my main concern. Apart from that, I don't see anything.
Yeah, again, we get to seal here, don't we? And
yeah, I mean,
there's
first,
no contribution.
Yeah, the contribution would have to be asked for at outline stage. That's the difficulty with asking for it now, in effect. So, having not secured a contribution at outline stage, we wouldn't be able to go, oh, hold on a second. We want you to now provide that. Again, it's not uncommon, though, I have to say. I mean, I've dealt with developments all over the country, and three things come up: flooding, transport, and doctors' surgeries. Those things come up no matter where you are. it's unfortunately, it is not just a fact of under provision, so to speak, it's also a lack of GPs as well in terms of those kind of things. So it's a much broader argument, a much more broader debate, rather than just can we throw some money at it.
Karen, you're okay. Yeah, I mean, let's not get on to GP surgeries. I think we've all got a view on that. My sister-in-law's a practice manager, and she's amazed at the difference between where she lives and where we live in terms of the ability to access doctor surgery, just purely for the way they manage themselves. For me, what I find what's been really interesting about the discussion and the presentation, which I thank you for, was actually I've been looking at the objecting comments from many of the residents, and I think nearly all of them have been answered in one way or another without rehashing it now. So I'm hoping residents have been listening in, or they've now seen the papers, that they'll be more relieved. And some residents are obviously still never going to be happy with the development on their doorstep. That's just a fact of life. But as a city, I think, particularly after last night's meeting, 120 social houses in one go is a significant advantage to the city, and hopefully to the residents who will be able to have a home over their head in a few months, one hopes, or however long it takes to develop. So unless anyone else has any further questions, we've effectively been asked to agree two things. One is to agree the reserved matters application, and the second is the revised recommendation for the Section 106 money, am I correct? So we're voting on two things here. So if I could ask, I would like a proposer. Thank you, Andy. It's always proposed by Andy, seconded by Pat. Thank you. Those in favour? Unanimous. If the next 12 months is that easy, it's going to be really good. I'll be bad. Okay, thank you very much. So we now move on to agenda item 8. Andrew, are you presenting that one as well?
For my sins, yes, thank you.
You're earning your money today.
Call him Andrew, by the way.
Okay, so this is an application at the former DEFRA site. First and foremost, we have to apologise. This has been an application that's been hanging around a while. It's part of our clearance of the backlog proposal. So, ironically, since the applications come in, a lot has moved on, so to speak, and a lot of the development now has been completed. And indeed, some of it is now occupied. So, what we're talking about here is an amendment to the original application relating to 2 garages between plots 1 and 2. This is where the sales centre was, in effect, and what they propose is that the sales centre is in effect converted into larger garages. Now you can see a bit further up on the layout there that there's 2 further garages as to how they would have been if they built them in accordance with the plans. But as I say, it's just a larger garage, and so in effect what the future residents will get is not only a garage but also a bit of storage facility behind it, which obviously you can use for home office, what you so wish. So this is what the garage looks like on site. It's now been occupied and completed. As I say, the application's been in a while. It probably was a sales centre when the application was submitted, so again apologies that it appears now retrospective. So as I say, the house is now occupied. This is what the garage looks like, and it's in accordance with the plans as submitted. This is the next door down, so to speak. This is what the garage would have looked like if they'd implemented or knocked down the sales centre and rebuilt it as approved plans. And this is what it just looks like from the back. So in terms of the care home, and again, the care home is now built, although again, not fully occupied yet. Yeah, as I say, that's just what it looks like from the rear. So again, it's not actually, whilst it appears bigger, it's still subservient to the house. It's still subservient to the dwellings. It doesn't cause any problem for us in terms of the street scene, and we're just recommending approval accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'm going to go to Pat because this is your ward. So,
Thank you, Chair. That was really why I'm indicating. It's an area I know well, obviously. And it seems a waste, actually, to knock something down and not make use of it, especially when it fits in as well as this does. So I do think we should approve this.
Yeah, I live in that ward, so that's my councillor. And I walk past it all the time with my dog, and actually I wouldn't even notice they were different in size until this application. I walked past it the other day and I went, oh yeah, it is a bit bigger. And likewise, it would seem crazy to knock something down to rebuild something 3 foot smaller. And also, I think you're going to have two very unhappy residents who've got slightly better garages now. Who Pat is then going to have to say the reason you haven't got a little office at the back there. But no, seriously, I see no real objection to this, or no reason we should be objecting. But people might want to have a different view on it. So, any questions from anybody? So proposed, seconded, yep. So those in favour of the recommendation to approve? 2 for 2. Any other business? Please.
Could members look out in future for their emails the day before a planning committee meeting? Just in case we have any site visits, and that's the day you would be told, it'd be the Wednesday, because our briefing, the chair's briefing, is the Tuesday. So do make sure you check your emails on the Wednesday before a committee meeting.
That's a very good point, because we do site visits a little bit earlier now. That is the intent, and also late papers. So officers I know, and Margaret in particular, chases people up to get their papers in prior. But it's not unusual to get late papers on a late in the afternoon on a Wednesday. Not anymore. I see. Okay, so have we gone back to Tuesday now? They have to be in by Tuesday. So even then, so at least you get 48 hours notice now. But it used to be sometimes only 12 hours, and so and we'd be reading them on the morning. So if there's no any other business, thanks very much for everyone. I don't think it's a record, but it's one of the quicker meetings we've had. I'm sure next month. Well, I'm not here next month. I'm in Bermuda, so I'm going home. So, Pat, you might have a big one next month. Thank you very much, everybody. Enjoy the weekend.